Christine starts at 3:15. Okay, yeah, I just realized he might be coming to teach us here. Maybe we should go sit over there.
What does he teach?
He does Chavos or something, and then he does Hi Aleph. Anyway, if you want to come in with me, let's go sit over there. I think he's going to come sit here. I just realized that there's going to be two shiurim happening in the same place. Hi Aleph, Shalom Aleichem. We're starting right away. Let me just come in here. Yeah, I need. You can learn with us. Oh, my cap. Oh, okay. As Hashem Yisbarach in Chassidus, we're up to this this learning. You can look here inside if you want. We're learning the Heilige Beis Yaakov about the spiritual import of Yovel and Shemitah. That Yovel is this very high place where you can say everything belongs to Hashem, including my own efforts. And Shemitah is the effort to give over to Hashem the things that you own. On Shemitah, we have to let go of using all of the produce of our fields as an economic benefit. It's a difficult thing to do. So that act of giving it over represents that I kind of like have an ego and I give it over to Hashem. And there's an effort involved in that. Whereas in Yovel, Hashem kind of steps in and takes care of everything himself. And whatever was me just gets nullified into Hashem. But to get to the Yovel, you have to have 7 years, 7 times counting the 7 years of Shemitah. And there's a big desire to skip the work of having an ego, working with an ego, learning to submit to Hashem. You just want to say, look, in the end, it's all God anyway. So God should just work it out and bring that great light of the Yovel immediately. And I shouldn't have to slog through, a 50-year process of working on myself. There's a big desire for this. And the Ishbitzer was just teaching us that this is something that the person who cursed Hashem's name, this is what it means. The pasuk said it was nokev Shem. Hashem made a hole in the name of Hashem. It means he wanted to, instead of dealing with the one way of putting it, the 4 letters of Hashem's name, Dalid is the word for 4. Dalid is like the 4 letters of Hashem's name. It also means delet, a doorway. Instead of respecting the doorway, which means the process of going from one place to another place and growth, he just wanted to bust through and make a hole. So the cursing of Hashem, as he's described right before the mitzvahs of Shemitah and Yovel, is where that story is at the end of Parshas Emor, right before Parshas Bahar. So this is not because this is a classic Ishbitzer thing. It's not because he was being negative. It's that he wanted God so badly that he was like piercing through Hashem's name to get to that infinite light above the 4 letters of Hashem's name. Oh, it's an amazing thing. And this is something that we each have to kind of deal with, working on our ego, and that's what the Shemitah is. So it's so hard to keep Shemitah, and it's a major challenge to this very day.
You filming this?
What's this? Yes, this is live on YouTube, and it's 2 people.
Do we know when the Yovel is, or
we don't count the Yovel anymore because you need to have the majority, at least the majority of each tribe here, and according to the Rambam, they have to also each be on their ancestral land. And so Yovel right now is just a theoretic concept in the Torah, but that Hashem will come back. So we have Shemitah. So he brings here an example from Shlomo HaMelech. We're going to skip a little bit these verses. And he says that he relates this to this really was very helpful to me to understand this Gemara. There's a Gemara in Masechet Shabbos 152b, which says that everybody at some point has to die, and their body has to turn into earth, and then come back with a revival of the dead. So says Ishbitzer, what this is talking about, beyond the literal, is that right before Hashem reveals the greatest light, all of the efforts of the human being have to become nullified, has to become clear, that it's all Hashem the whole way through. The way he was been speaking about Yovel here, as we've been learning, is that on Yovel, the only thing I've left that's mine is my davening. And that's this very wondrous thing, because the depths of the davening of my soul is itself Hashem's own davening. So it's this amazing, wondrous thing, very hard for the mind to grasp. But it's not like we're gone. We're there in a wondrous oneness with Hashem. So right before that happens, there's this great sense of everything becoming totally nullified, and particularly all of our efforts being nullified, realizing that it's all Hashem. That's what it means. The bodies have to turn to dust and then be brought back. That's what it's talking about. The essence of the Yovel year is in that great future. So I forgot you're all giving a share here, but it's really fine. The essence of the Yovel year is in the future. And 1 hour before, just before the Yovel comes, kol avodas yevutal kol avodas ha'adam. All of the efforts of mankind will become nullified. We'll realize it was all God working through us the whole way through. This speaks a lot to the whole paradox of free choice and divine omniscience. That in the Shemitah year, we're recognizing God and that God's the true owner of the land and letting go of ourselves, but we have what to let go of. We have what to do to a very demanding effort to work with our ego, with our sense of ownership, with our sense of our estate and our property, and give it back to Hashem. And this is mamash a very profound effort that we have to do. Whereas the Yovel year is a much, much higher kind of bittul, where just Hashem just comes and kind of shows that not only is he the owner of all that we should submit to, but even our very act all along of making 7 Shemittahs and submitting ourselves and nullifying our egos, even that doesn't belong to us. It was all God working through us the whole way through. V'zeshi sebagama retzua shel eretz ha'amamim mafsekes ben Yehuda v'Galil ki Yehuda hi hatkufa shel Yasser l'mechakalo v'Galil rov avoda shel Adam. Very amazing thing. There's a very fascinating Gemara in Gittin. We're learning in the laws of Shemitah that the holiness of Eretz Yisrael in terms of the mitzvahs of the land depend on when Ezra came the second time. Right, Yeshua was here, and then they were conquered, and then Ezra came for the building of the second temple. They only made certain parts of Eretz Yisrael holy, not the entire biblical Eretz Yisrael. So the Gemara in Gittin says that there is even a strip of land that is not Eretz Yisrael that, to a certain extent, divides between 2 parts of Eretz Yisrael, namely the north, the Galil, and Yehuda, which is the central heartlands. Ki Yehuda, because he says these 2 parts of Eretz Yisrael represent 2 different spiritual energies. Ki Yehuda hu hatkufos shel Yasel machakalo. Yehuda is the strength that Hashem gives to those who wait. That Yehuda represents that light from beyond that Hashem gives after, like a Yovel, after we wait. V'Galil merumaz al avoda shel Adam. And the Galil, which is the northern area, represents the service of people. Very fascinating thing that throughout history, and particularly about 500 years ago, the author of the Shulchan Aruch of Yosef Cairo and the great Kabbalist Arizal, and many of the big rabbinic authorities were all in the Galil. They were in the north, where Tzfat is. And it's very fascinating. So that represents, he says, that part of the service of Hashem that is our efforts. And whereas Yehuda, which is where closer to where Yerushalayim is, and the central part of Eretz Yisrael, that represents the gift level of spirituality. It's not my efforts, it's just Mamish Hashem. And in between these two, there has to be something that divides them, because we're not yet at that great place of recognizing the oneness between our efforts and the gift of God. We still perceive things separate. There's no way for a person through their service to reach that greatness of Hashem. This we spoke about from the Gila Daf Test, and the Gemara says about effort and finding. The Gemara says if you You gotta, if you put in effort and you didn't find, then don't trust it. It means you didn't really put effort in. If you didn't put any effort in, but you found, it's talking about success in the Torah study. You didn't put any effort, but you found, also don't trust it. It's easy come, easy go. But if you put in effort and you found, then you can trust it that your connection is real. So everybody asks, why does it say you put the effort and find? So you put the effort in and you achieve. But that's the same dynamic. There's this very important dynamic in spirituality, in the service of Hashem. We put efforts in, but what we reach is not exactly, it's because of our efforts, but not because our efforts got us there. Our efforts made us into a different kind of a person, so that that light from Hashem can reach us. But not that we created that light from Hashem through our efforts. Light is something that is a total gift. We created ourselves into being a better vessel. It's one way of putting it. So even though nowadays there is this strip of land that divides those two parts of Eretz Yisrael, dividing these two energies between efforts and the gifts from above, but still to do everything we can to try to make that separation less and less. That we should try to make it that our efforts and the light from Hashem can be close to each other. How do we do that? The Hurak al Yadei Shemitah. That's the whole work of Shemitah. We're giving over our efforts to Hashem. We're learning to relate up. We're learning to connect up. It's like in a certain way every week when we make Shabbos. It's not that we create Shabbos. Shabbos is a great gift from above. But when you make the house nice and clean and you buy beautiful flowers and you dress in Shabbos the clothes and you sing songs, then you become a vessel for that light. And so this also on Fridays, similar to this piece of land that separates between the efforts and the gift. Fridays often there's a big temptation to become angry or upset and then feel hassled and anxious. That's the dividing place between our work during the week and receiving the light of Hashem on Shabbos. And every Shemitah year also, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect up the sense of what's mine and then give it back to Hashem. Sheli, Shalach. Like we said, like the Yeshivat learned, like he learned from his father, that Sheli, Shalach is the level of Shemitah, what's mine is yours. And then Yovel is even level up, is Shalach, Shalach. What's yours is yours, that even my efforts are all yours, and it's all yours. Shmita matchil mi Rosh Hashanah. This is why Shmita begins from Rosh Hashanah. Ki Shmita hu habirur ba'avoda asher nesru bo kol hadvarim hanitzrachim l'chayus ha'adam. Because what is Shmita doing is clarifying and revealing through my service that all of the things I need to do to make a living and to cause the things that I need to eat to survive, to cause them to grow, I cannot do. I'm not allowed to do. This is showing that Hashem is called the one who existed before there's a world and who now exists after there's a world. That's why it starts on Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah is the day of corresponding to creation. Before there was a world, and now that there is a world, and it's still there's the same Hashem the whole way through. As nivra, ki as haschalas habriya, because it was then that was the beginning of creation. Lochen yovo she'az moser yiraz shezois l'Hashem yisbarach u'modez b'chol retzonis v'Hashem yisbarach me'id kekol mitzvah yisbarach. U'zeh matchil yovel miyom kippur. As opposed to yovel, when do we blow the shofar? After Yom Kippur or on Yom Kippur of the 50th year. So it's true that the halachas do begin on Rosh Hashanah, but the kind of sort of trumpeting of the beginning of it is Yom Kippur, and that represents this transcendent place where Hashem says, it's all me, and everything you ever did is all me, and a person has a sense not of submission and doing the work of submitting my ego, nullifying myself, but rather a sense of expansion, that I can do anything and it will all be God doing it. That you can have this wondrous unity of the yoga. I can do anything and it will all be God doing it through me. You can understand the danger of skipping to that, because if I say, oh, I won't do the work of submitting my ego first, I won't have that discipline. I'll just go straight to saying, look, it's all God anyway, so I'll do whatever I feel like and it'll all be God, right? You can understand how there's a great temptation to do that. But we have to be strong and keep Shemitah. And as he said before, and we learned a couple days ago, that represents the 50 years for each person between age 20, when a person becomes spiritually mature and accountable for their actions, and age 70, which is the time kind of older age. And if a person dies after the age of 70, they're considered still to have lived to old age. So nowadays, Baruch Hashem, we should all live to 120, have another 50 years. But he's saying that we each have a personal Yovel experience of going from age 20 to age 70. It takes time to grow into a real kind of ripe human being, where we can unify these two places of the discipline of submission, of submitting my ego to Hashem, of nullifying myself and giving myself over, and the kind of freedom of Yovel, of knowing that whatever I do, it's all from Hashem, in a sense of a much lesser sense of restriction, because it's all God working through me anyways. So it takes 50 years to get to a true place of that Yovel. There's a story about Reb Simcha Shlomo, one of the great rabbis. One of his Chassidim asked, he said, we're learning all day, and we have a very rigid life, and we see the Rebbes are traveling, they're taking vacations, they're talking to people, they're doing all kinds of things. They're also learning tons of Torah, but their schedule is like all over the place. They seem to be a lot less bound by than us younger folk. And the Rebbe took out a checkers board, and he said, in checkers, each piece can only move to one square and has to go diagonally. But once it gets to the end of the board, it becomes, they call it a queen or whatever it is, and then it becomes able to move multiple spaces and move in all kinds of directions. So first you have to go through the step-by-step of Shemitah, and then you can come to that amazing place called Yovel. Now the Ishbitz returns to another case of a person described in Chumash as doing something wrong. This is in Parshas Shlach, the story of the person who gathered wood on Shabbos, and there was another kind of public act of rebellion, and where a person did something really awful. He was also arguing particularly against the last Hey of Hashem's name, the fourth letter, the letter Hey, that corresponds to the Delet, the doorway of process, and knock on the door, and respecting spaces, and going in with Shemitah. The letter Hey also represents the sphere of Malchus, which is the seventh sphere, because the Yud in Hashem's name is Chochmah, the Hey in Hashem's name is Bina, and they represent the intellectual upper sphere, and then Vav is the sixth sphere from Chesed to Yesod, and Hey is Malchus. So Hey represents the seventh. So he also is arguing against Shemitah, against that seventh year, the seventh sphere, which is the last letter of Hashem's name, the Hey. The difference between the one who cursed Hashem's name and the one who gathered wood on Shabbos is the person who gathered wood on Shabbos wanted to live a totally expansive life and be filled with so much love, such that he would be so filled with love, he would actually lose his sense of recognizing God at all. He would just be in this flow where he would just really lose his sense of actually being aware of Hashem. I'm sorry, that was the Makalo. That's the one who cursed Hashem. Like we said, he wanted to bust through and go straight to the light. Whereas the Makoshesh, the one who was gathering wood on Shabbos, Ratzli Spashmidas a year, he would made the opposite mistake. He wanted to be so filled with great awareness and fear of Hashem, of closeness, that could create a sense of great awe and fear of Hashem. And his argument was, even if a person submits and holds himself back in everything that they do and has tremendous discipline. Ma yaseh b'nistaros. But what can a person ever do for those things that are like subconscious, for those things that are hidden from them, those habits and things they do without thinking? Asher ein seichel adam magia sham, the person's consciousness and awareness don't reach there, and I have all these imperfections that I'm incapable of fixing because I'm not even aware of them. Ulezeh achar ma'aseh makosh nemar leMoshe parshas tzitzis. So that's why in Parshat Shalach you have the story that he was gathering wood and he's saying that act of defiance was to say, I want to be so aware of Hashem that even the furthest things from my consciousness should be totally dedicated. And he was feeling, we'll see how this relates to the act of gathering wood. I see that tomorrow. But before he speaks about how it relates to the actual act of gathering the wood, which is the way he broke Shabbos, one of the 39 malachas, is the Ishbitzer speaks about tzitzis, because right after the story of him gathering, the Torah has the mitzvah of tzitzis. Ki techeles meral nahoira tichla. The color, the blue that we have on the tzitzis, is about the great light of purpose. There is such a thing as a kind of a string of blue that is representing God's own throne, of tremendous fear of Hashem that is above the understanding of the person. It's so beyond me. There is such a thing that of places within the human psyche that the consciousness can't reach. There's parts of my personality I'm just incapable of even going there and doing any work there. And I would like to be aware of Hashem and have fear of Hashem even there. And so the message of the tchelis of the tzitzis is, yes, it's true. There's a desire for that true blue of total dedication to Hashem, total awareness of Hashem and everything that I do, even in my superconscious, subconscious, everything. However, even though that does exist, but Hashem doesn't expect from us to be able to do that because it's simply beyond our capabilities. That which is outside of our abilities, Hashem says it's okay. That's what the message of the Tchelis is. Amazing learning. The message of the blue and the tzitzis is, yes, there is this kind of true blue place of total awareness beyond anybody's capabilities, but I'm not asking that of you. I'm telling you, you're connected to me, even though you don't have that. Even though, so you tie it onto you to see it and recognize Hashem knows this and recognizes this, but is not demanded from you. Very fascinating thing. And this is a fixing of the sin of the person who was gathering the wood, because his desire, we'll see tomorrow why, but his desire for gathering the wood was out of this desire to have tremendous awareness of God, even in places that a person's awareness is incapable of reaching. And so Hashem kind of answered that by saying, here, have the tzitzis, know that I know about this. There is such a place, but I'm not asking you to have that degree of perfection. Gewalt, we'll see more about this and how this relates. What he's saying, it's another side of the coin of arguing against Shemitah. We'll see how that works. But in other words, part of what Shemitah is the discipline of submitting my ego. Another part of what it is submitting and recognizing there are parts of what I would like to fix in my ego that I can't even fix, and being okay with that. We'll discuss this more tomorrow. Visit Hashem. Now, move into the halachas of Shemitah. Hashem's Baruch. So first of all, as we were learning yesterday, the fruits of Shemitah have a holiness, which means that you're not allowed to destroy them, and you're not allowed to even prepare them or use them in ways that are not the normal ways of using them. And we spoke about some examples. Today we got up to raisins. You're allowed in the Shemitah year to make grapes into raisins, to dry out figs, to dry out dates, to dry out apples, to dry out prunes, and all that is normal to make dried fruit from, you're allowed to do on the Shemitah year. Juicing. You're allowed to make wine and you're allowed to make grape juice, no problem. Just what's left over of the grapes has to be disposed of, as we'll see at the end of today's year, how to dispose of leftovers. Also allowed to squeeze out lemons, oranges, grapefruits. However, the poskim advise that it's better not to make it into a completely filtered juice. With grapes and wine, it's fine, but with these other citrus fruits, it's better to have some of the pulp of the fruit in the juice. And also, as you're squeezing out the grapefruit or the orange, one should try to make sure to squeeze it out as totally as possible. So you'll have as little left over, because whatever is going to be left over is going to not be used. We'll see again how to dispose of them. Mashing. It is permissible to mash fruits and vegetables that are normal to mash, and to make jams or spreads out of them, because you're not turning them all the way into a juice, you're just mashing them, and that's part of their normal way of being prepared. However, one should not mash things that is abnormal to mash. If there are some juices that come out while you're mashing, then you should leave it in there and not pour the juice out to different vessels. You're allowed to mash things up for children, babies to eat, even though only like bananas, maybe elderly people eat mashed bananas, but most of the time it's basically only young kids that eat mashed bananas. So is that considered normal? Yes, because even though it's not normal for adults, but since it's normal for kids, it's fine to mash the bananas for them. It is also similarly permitted to crush garlic or onions and mix them in with ground beef to make hamburgers. That's also permitted to do on Shemitah year, because that's normal. Again, the normal uses. What about peeling fruits? You're allowed to peel fruits, even though some people do eat the skin. For instance, an apple. Tapuche eitz, gezer, mulafafon. You're allowed to peel carrots, cucumbers, even though they could be eaten with their skin. But since it's normal enough and some people don't like the skin, it's considered normal of practice. You're allowed to cut them off, and we'll see again at the end of today's year how to dispose of them. However, when you're doing that, you should take care to only peel off the normal thickness of peel. You shouldn't do extra thick peeling to take away from the actual inside of the carrot or whatnot. However, one should not peel fruits and vegetables that are not normally peeled. Okay. If there is a part of the apple that went bad, you're allowed on the Shemitah year to cut that part off, just as you're used to in other years. Okay, how do we do the disposal, and how does this relate to seeds and peels and skins? Okay, and leftovers. What is the minhag in Eretz Yisrael is to have a special Shemitah wastebasket for the leftovers of the fruits of Shemitah. Also to put into them seeds and peels that have the holiness of Shvis. Not all of them do, as we'll see. And the best is that for each 24-hour period to have its own bag. Why do we do this? Because if you would, let's say, have a multiple day bag, then you have older vegetables in there that have already reached a certain degree of decay. If you put today's leftovers in there, they will decay faster because of the decay that's in there from yesterday. So in a way, you're causing their destruction to happen faster than it normally would. So for this reason, the poskim say the best is that what you basically have is a Shemitah, a separate Shemitah wastebasket or garbage bag for each day where you only put into it leftovers of Shemitah fruits. And each bag from each day gets left and not put into the general garbage until the fruits become no longer edible for humans and no longer edible even for animals. And then you're allowed to put it all into the garbage, or you can put it onto a compost pile, however, as you know, environmentally aware you want to be. But okay, so what one is not allowed to throw into garbage, the peels, fruits of shmiz, if they are still theoretically edible to a person, even if it's only difficult. For instance, the peels of apples, the peels of cucumbers, or if the peel still has some of the fruit still stuck onto it, like the peel of a potato that still has some potato on it. And so therefore, all these things you can't throw into regular garbage, they need to be put into the special Shemitah garbage. What about peels? Okay, so now we're getting to specificities of which peels and which things. Generally speaking, the Chazon Ish taught that it depends not on the practice and the times of the Talmud, but on the practice of the country and time that you are in to determine if the peel is considered to be food or if the seeds are considered to be food. There has to be a normal enough practice of people eating the peels or eating the seeds in order to have holiness of Shemitah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
There was a few weeks ago, I think there was like something in the news about how the government was doing something with like exportation of produce or importation of produce. They were getting produce from other countries, and there was like a law passed, or there was some kind of conversation about that. Is that, I think that's like preparation for Shemitah in a sense. I don't know if that's what they were thinking, but if your produce is more so dependent on like other countries trading it to you for something else, that might be a way to, mitigate the minimization of the produce that you can, the access to the produce that you have in Shemitah, right?
Well, yeah, meaning it would make it that less of the fruits and vegetables in the store will have holiness of Shemitah.
Right, because
so they're gonna have you're gonna
well.
start seeing in the groceries what's called Yavul Chul, produce of Chul is Chutz La'aretz, produce from outside Eretz Yisrael.
So that happens a lot in Shemitah years.
You'll see, I don't know exactly how much, but you definitely see it in the grocery store. Some things are going to be Yavul Chul, some things are going to be,
because there's no Shemitah chok on fruits that are grown outside of Israel.
That's right. Fruits outside Eretz Yisrael have no, except like we saw yesterday, that near on the other side of the Jordan River, in this country of Jordan, if they're within, I don't know exactly how many hundreds of kilometers, but the area that was conquered by Yehoshua and Moshe Rabbeinu, even though that area was not conquered by Ezra, but that area is still considered that anything grown there, if it was owned by Jews, that it would have the holiness of Shemitah. So, and also up in Syria, areas over there also are considered. However, I don't think there's any Jews who own land there today, so it's basically not an issue. So things do get brought from Jordan and from Syria and other countries. Yeah.
Isn't it also possible that even though a produce item might have been grown outside of Israel, that once it is in Israel, it has some kind of like Shemitah chok on it?
No, what could happen is if it gets if you have it brought and then planted in Israel, that is a question. Or if you brought it over with earth in the earth still growing and then planted it here, there's a question about whether it gains the holiness of Shemitah. But
if you wanted to be extra safe,
bringing in fruits from outside Eretz Yisrael is no question that it's just a regular apple.
but that's like according to halacha, right?
Yeah.
And it's talking about letting the land rest, right? Which is Shemitah. So it's referring in that case, like there's no real discrepancy between the halacha and the actual pesukim, because it's talking about the land itself. But
except the psukim do say that the Hashem gave us v'hayta Shabbos aretz lachem le'ochla, that Hashem saying, I want you to have that which grows from the land to eat. We spoke this yesterday. The Ramban holds that that's actually a mitzvah to eat the Shemitah fruit. Most of the Rishonim disagree. They say it's not a mitzvah; it's a heter, it's an allowance to eat. But it's still the fact that it has holiness is a great thing, and it's considered that you're connecting to the holiness of Israel to eat those fruits. It's not like there's a value to avoid eating the fruits.
But if you let's say that you define the land in a sense as like a collection of naturally growing or naturally decaying items. Okay, because in a sense that is what the land is. And if you were to bring another produce item into that collection, it would not be in a different category. That would be the category that it would be in, which would be a collection of a bunch of natural produce items that are either growing or decaying, even though it's not from the land itself.
Right, but Shavta Haaretz Shabbos Lashem. It's only this land that has that mitzvah of Shemitah. Even if you bring fruits from elsewhere, they don't get connected to the laws of Shemitah. The pasuk says that the Eretz Yisrael should rest. No other piece of earth has that mitzvah. So if an apple grew in Timbuktu when you bring it here, it's fine. It's does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I just like if you were to be extra safe about it, you would not even want to do any I guess you could say quote unquote melachot on fruits from outside the land once they were in the land.
Well, again, it's not melachot.
Quote unquote.
The melachot are not to work.
Like,
right, to work. What's forbidden is to work the land here, to plow the land, to plant, to reap and harvest en masse. But to
do certain
things. But to take the food that you need, but to take the food that you need and eat it here certainly is in spirit of the law. You just have to be careful. You have a special Shemitah basket to throw out the extras, but it's not so hard. This is very doable, and it's a positive thing. It's a connection to the holiness of the land to do it. It's not like it's the safer, better thing is to just eat things from outside Eretz Yisrael all year. This is considered to be.
What if it's a better thing, not necessarily to eat what's been imported, but to eat what's not like vegan? You know what I mean? What if you just switch to a more carnivorous diet?
Right.
You know
but listen, the person does not have to eat the fruits of Shemitah, but but there's no reason not to. You're ingesting holiness. It's good for you. It's a holy thing.
No, I know, but if you're concerned about,
there are only two things to be concerned about, which is selling it and trying to make a profit on it, which you're not supposed to do, and or like we said, plowing, harvesting, and working the land that you're not allowed to do, and causing the fruits of Shemitah to be destroyed or to be kind of undermined, treated cheaply. But to eat, the Torah says, go ahead and eat. The Torah wants you to eat.
I know, but if you're concerned about actually keeping the laws of Shemitah, and let's say you go to the grocery store and you want to buy something and you don't know whether or not it's a vegetable, you don't know whether or not like Shemitah law has been kept, then like better safe than sorry, you don't get it, right? So
especially a vegetable, because like we learned yesterday, vegetables, grains, and legumes, even if they're grown by somebody who keeps Shemitah, which means they didn't plant them or plow the earth or harvest them en masse, they're still forbidden. Because the rabbis made a blanket prohibition against all those. The only thing they didn't prohibit are fruits of a tree and bushes. So it's
like if God forbid you like break Shemitah because you either didn't know or you didn't know what the law was, you were unclear on what the law was, then it would just be better to abstain, at least to a certain degree, to abstain
right,
from
but
that.
That's why it's important to learn the halachas. It's not so hard to do. You're just careful with it. You just don't put it in the regular garbage when you're done. And it's not so hard to do. And okay, I mean, yeah, a person might be, but that's part of what we're learning is to take away should not be scary. For instance, if you, and again, we're going to get to this next week, but there is a widespread practice of selling the farm to a non-Jew in order to also even make fruits grown in Israel to be considered not to have the holiness of Shemitah. Many disagree with that practice because they say even if a non-Jew buys it, it will still have the holiness of Shemitah.
So a lot of the fruits, there's no fruit or vegetable that can be picked from a tree or a field, right?
No, there certainly are. Everybody will be able to go on a yeshiva trip, B'ezrat Hashem, to people open up their vineyards, people open up their etrog. You can go and pick your own.
How is the land resting in that sense?
Because the Torah doesn't say you're not allowed to harvest at all. It says you cannot harvest en masse in a business-like way. What you are allowed to do is subsistence farming to take that which you need for your family. That you are allowed to do. The other major practice that's done is called otzar bezdin, which is another thing you're going to see in the supermarkets. And there's three things you see in the supermarket. You see your yevul produce from outside Eretz Yisrael, like we said, which is no question at all. You see heter mechira, that means things that were grown in Israel on land that was sold to a Gentile, which there's controversy about, but the minhag, the practice in Yerushalayim is to treat it as having no holiness of Shemitah. And then there's otzar bezdin. Otzar bezdin means it's a farmer who keeps Shemitah. And what happens is that the Jewish court, sets up a whole system of harvesting it en masse, but they are allowed to do it because they're harvesting it en masse in order to distribute it to people at cost.
But I think I just wouldn't farm. I mean, how do you even know like where to draw the line between what you can and cannot do? What counts as
the line is, why are you doing it? Are you doing it in order to give out to people at cost so that they can just eat the holy fruits?
Okay, but
are you
in
doing
terms
it
of
for
like
a profit?
based in that's not even enforceable. You can't determine intention.
It's
so is there a different
it's totally
factor?
enforceable. It's totally enforceable. What happens is the Beis Din sets up the entire system. They employ the people doing the harvesting. They employ the truck drivers and the whole production all the way to the grocery store. And then at the grocery store, you see otzar beis din. That means the storehouse of the court. And the cost that you pay is only to pay the cost of the workers, of the trucks, and so on. Whereas the fruit itself is free. So the actual farmer makes 0 shekels or dollars on this whole thing. No one makes any money. Just the Otzar Beis Din is overseeing this. And this is a very ancient practice, which you can find described in the Ramban, Nachmanides commentary to Pashas Bahar, where he brings it to Sefta from the times of the Tanaim, a good couple thousand or more years ago, describing how they used to do it in basically this fashion. So there are a few different Beit Dins today in Eretz Yisrael who do this. And basically what they're doing is they're distributing it to people, but nobody's making a profit on the fruits. Understand? Okay, just do another couple of halachas before we finish up. We were on the topic of seeds and skins or peels or shells. So the general concept is, like we saw from the Chazarish, that we go by what's normal in the place and time that you live. So therefore, he brings some examples. Seeds of citrus fruits, seeds of apricots, the seeds that are inside grapes, the seeds of carobs. None of them have the holiness of Shemitah. That means if they're clean and there's no little bits of fruit still stuck to them, these seeds are not eaten by anyone, or if they are, it's so rare that they're considered to not be food anymore. And you can throw those kinds of seeds into regular garbage so long as they're not still connected to any
what it
fruit.
says in the actual Chumash itself. It says
Joshua, 1 second. I have like 3 more minutes left. Just going to finish this halacha, and then we'll talk about it. It's good. I want to hear it. But let me just finish these things about seeds, and then we'll be done. Then I'll be able to talk to you. Seeds of dates, olives, peaches, prunes. So there's differences of opinion. Some say all you have to do is wipe them off nicely, and then you can put them into regular garbage. Others say you have to make sure you get every little shred of fruit off of them. And there are those who say that they do have the holiness of Shemitah, even without any food on them. So the best for those the seeds of dates, olives, peaches, prunes, is to put them in the Shemitah basket and not in the regular garbage. Seeds of apples and of pears, also one can be lenient if they're clean and don't have any apples stuck to them, put them in the regular garbage. Seeds of watermelon and of other melons is unclear, and it's better to be strict on it. People do eat watermelon seeds. The seed of an avocado, if you've totally cleaned it off, no problem to throw it out. What if I have a pot or a plate that has little bits of leftover holy fruits on them? Even though they're going to go down the drain. But since it's such a small amount that even people who are careful and don't want to waste anything of value would not all year round in a normal circumstances save those tiny little bits of fruit that are on there. So then you're allowed to just wash them and let those little tiny bits, they're insignificant, they can go down the drain, no problem. However, if you did gather together all the leftovers, even though it's a small amount and you have it in a little pile, then you should not just throw them into the garbage, they should go into the Shemitah basket. Okay, gewaldig. Shkoyach Aleph. And let's talk sometime later today about